It wasn't real, not in the way people think. The sentence didn't come with drama or warning. It slipped into the conversation almost casually, yet it carried a weight that instantly changed how everything was understood. When Dakota Johnson reflected on those now iconic scenes, her tone wasn't defensive or exaggerated, but calm, almost reflective, as if she was finally ready to correct a narrative that had lived for years. And in that quiet honesty, a question emerged that fans weren't prepared for: had they been misreading everything all along? For audiences, the connection between Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan in 50 Shades of Grey felt undeniably real. It wasn't just about performance, it was about the way their chemistry seemed to blur the boundaries between fiction and authenticity. Viewers didn't just watch the story unfold, they felt it, interpreting every glance, every pause, every moment of tension as something deeper than scripted interaction. Over time, that perception became part of the film's identity, reinforcing the idea that what was happening on screen reflected something genuine between the two actors. But behind that carefully constructed illusion was a reality far more controlled than most people imagined. According to both Dakota and Jamie, those scenes were not spontaneous expressions of emotion, but highly structured sequences shaped by choreography, timing, and an entire team ensuring everything remained within strict boundaries. There were coordinators, technical adjustments, and constant communication, all working together to create something that felt natural while being anything but. The spontaneity that audiences believed in was, in many ways, the result of precision rather than instinct. That contrast between perception and reality is where the story becomes most compelling. Because while viewers saw connection, intensity, and vulnerability, the actors themselves were navigating something entirely different, an environment that required them to maintain professionalism under conditions that could easily feel uncomfortable. Dakota has hinted that there were moments where the pressure of making everything appear authentic created its own kind of strain, not because of the scenes themselves, but because of what they demanded emotionally. Jamie Dornan, on the other hand, approached the experience with a different kind of awareness. Known for being private and grounded, Jamie Dornan often emphasized the importance of separating his work from his personal life. For him, maintaining that boundary wasn't just a preference, it was essential. While audiences projected meaning onto the scenes, he focused on the technical side of performance, ensuring that what was being created stayed within the limits of his role as an actor. Yet even with those boundaries in place, the process wasn't without its challenges. Repeating emotionally intense scenes over long shooting schedules can create a strange dynamic, one where familiarity builds but doesn't necessarily translate into personal closeness. It's a space where two people must trust each other completely in a professional sense, while simultaneously keeping a certain distance. That balance is difficult to maintain, and it often leads to misunderstandings, not just for the audience, but sometimes even within the experience itself. What makes Dakota's statement so striking is that it doesn't dismiss the connection entirely, it reframes it. By saying it wasn't real, she isn't denying that something existed, she's clarifying that what people believed they saw wasn't the full picture. There was effort, structure, and intention behind every moment, all designed to create an illusion that would resonate emotionally with viewers. And in that sense, the success of those scenes lies not in their authenticity, but in how convincingly they simulated it. Looking back, there are subtle clues that support this perspective. Interviews where both actors laugh awkwardly when asked about their chemistry, moments where Dakota deflects personal questions, and instances where Jamie redirects the conversation entirely. At the time, these reactions were often interpreted as playful or evasive, but now they feel more like glimpses into a reality that didn't align with public perception. As the truth behind those scenes begins to surface, it forces a reconsideration of what audiences value when watching a performance. Is it the belief that something real exists between the actors, or the ability of those actors to create that belief so convincingly that it feels indistinguishable from reality? In the case of 50 Shades of Grey *, that line became almost invisible, leading to a level of investment that extended far beyond the film itself. And perhaps that's the most revealing part of all. The secrets behind those scenes aren't about hidden relationships or undisclosed emotions, they're about the craft of storytelling, the discipline required to make something artificial feel authentic. Yet in understanding that, something shifts, because it challenges the very foundation of what people thought they knew. Because sometimes, the most powerful illusion isn't the one created on screen, it's the one we continue to believe long after the cameras stop rolling. The moment those revelations began circulating, the reaction was impossible to ignore. Fans who had spent years believing in the raw authenticity of Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan on screen suddenly found themselves questioning everything they thought they understood. Some felt surprised, even slightly disoriented, as if a carefully constructed illusion had been quietly dismantled. Others, however, were fascinated, not disappointed, but intrigued by what this new perspective revealed about the craft behind 50 Shades of Grey. What quickly became clear was that the conversation was no longer just about those scenes, but about the nature of performance itself. Viewers began to realize how easily emotion can be interpreted as truth, especially when it's delivered with precision and consistency. The line between acting and authenticity had always been thin, but in this case, it had become almost invisible. And that invisibility is what made the experience so convincing, and, in hindsight, so easy to misread. At the same time, Dakota's perspective added an emotional layer that many hadn't considered before. While the scenes were controlled and carefully managed, the process of creating them was not without its psychological impact. Repetition, vulnerability, and the pressure to deliver believable performances can create an intensity that lingers, even if the emotions themselves are part of a constructed narrative. That doesn't make them real, in the traditional sense, but it does make the experience more complex than a simple performance. For Jamie Dornan, the situation highlights a different kind of challenge, the need to maintain clear boundaries in an environment that constantly blurs them. His approach has always been grounded in separation, a conscious effort to keep his personal identity distinct from the roles he plays. In revisiting these scenes, Jamie Dornan reinforces the idea that professionalism, not emotional entanglement, was at the core of what audiences were watching. It's a perspective that contrasts sharply with how those moments were originally perceived. As these viewpoints come together, a more nuanced picture begins to emerge. The secrets aren't hidden scandals or undisclosed relationships, but rather the mechanisms that make storytelling so effective. It's about choreography, communication, and trust, elements that operate behind the scenes to create something that feels effortless and genuine. When those elements are invisible, the illusion becomes stronger, allowing audiences to fill in the gaps with their own interpretations. This shift in understanding has led many to revisit the film with a different mindset. Scenes that once felt spontaneous are now seen as carefully constructed, while moments of tension or hesitation take on new meaning. Instead of searching for signs of real emotion between the actors, viewers are beginning to appreciate the skill required to create that impression. In a way, the magic hasn't disappeared, it has simply been redefined. Yet, there is still a sense of tension that remains. Because even with all the structure and control, there is something undeniably human about the way those performances resonate. The ability to simulate emotion so convincingly requires more than technique, it requires access to something internal, something that can't be entirely separated from the individual. That subtle overlap is what keeps the conversation alive, preventing it from being reduced to a purely technical explanation. As the discussion continues, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The power of those scenes was never just about what was shown, but about what was felt by the audience. And now, with a deeper understanding of how they were created, that power takes on a different form. It becomes less about believing in a hidden reality and more about recognizing the artistry that made it possible.